Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. She's the co-author of several books about Elvis. She grew up at Graceland and is the first cousin to the king of rock and roll. She has traveled the globe telling the private world of the Presley family. Please welcome to the show, Donna Presley. Donna, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tommy. Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am excited and honored to have you on. And I know my listeners and practically the whole world wants to always to know about Graceland and Elvis. And you have this firsthand knowledge of what it was like. And we're just going to dive into it. Your mother is Nash, who was the youngest sister of Elvis's father, Vernon. So our listeners, that's where the connection comes to.
That's correct.
You grew up at Graceland. You started spending your summers there at the age of 10, but I'm almost positive that my listeners are going, well, what was it like? So Donna, tell us, what was it like living or growing up at Graceland?
Can I say awesome?
You can say awesome for sure.
Oh, it was tremendous, Tommy. I mean, it was so much fun. Now, when Elvis was at home, the family kind of called it controlled chaos because you never knew what was going to happen next with Elvis. But it was absolutely great, you know, being so close to our grandmother and aunts and uncles and just being there and, you know, having a great time. We did, you know, same things that every other family does, you know, had family dinners and, you know, you had Christmas, you had Thanksgiving and so forth. And I was able to see my grandmother every day. So it was fantastic. I mean, it really was. There's no downside to it whatsoever.
When did you realize how much of a star Elvis was? Because he was 15 years older than you.
That's correct. That is correct. Funny story. I was in the 5th grade. I mean, Elvis had been a star all my life, you know. Mm-hmm. But I think it really, really honed in on how big a star. And it's kind of a funny story. When this girl walked up to me in the cafeteria when I was in the 5th grade, and she asked me if I would touch her milk carton. And I said, why? He said, because you have the same blood and the same DNA as Elvis. And I just want to say that, you know, somebody that I knew was close to him. So I did. That's when it really hit me. He's huge.
Then I'm imagining that you were pretty popular at school. Everybody wanted to be your friend.
Pretty much. Well, you know, I mean, really, you know, when I lived in Missouri when I was younger. And so I didn't, you know, I didn't take anybody to Graceland. But, you know, when I was 17 and we moved on to the Circle G Ranch, then I had lots of people wanting to come home with me for sure.
Tell my listeners the story about when you were around age 14 or 15. Elvis proposes that you should live at Graceland.
You've really done your homework.
I do my homework a little bit for my guests come on.
Yes, he did. As I said, I spent all my summers there from the time I was, you know, 10 years old. And so when I was about 14 or 15 years old, my mother and dad had come to pick me up to take me back home to Missouri to go back to school. And Elvis took me and my mother and my dad into the dining room. And he said, Aunt Nash, you know, Uncle Earl, we really love having Donnie, which is what he called me. Donnie stayed with us and we want her to just live with us. You know, I'm gone a lot and it'd be so great for her to be here with Dodger, our grandmother. And so, you know, you can come visit her anytime you want to. I'll buy her a car. I'll send her to school. And when she graduates from high school, you know, I'll help her do whatever she wants to do. Well, I'm sitting here going, yes, yes. And my mom said, no. She's my little girl and she's going home with me. And Elvis said, but Aunt Nash. And she said, I know, honey, you take great care of her and all, but really and truly, you know, she's my little girl, so she needs to go home with me. And he knew he was not going to win that argument, so he let it drop. But fortunately, when I was 17, Elvis bought the Circle G Ranch in Walls, Mississippi. And we moved on to there because he asked my dad to go to work for him, overseeing the properties and taking care of everything. So we lived there, and I graduated from Horn Lake High School there, and my senior year. And then when he sold the ranch in '69, he brought the whole family onto the grounds at Graceland, and we lived behind the house there.
So I visited Graceland a while back, and my memory's not completely remembering the entire property because it was so big. But I remember there was in the back, I think off to the right, was there a building that could have been his offices, or there was offices at that point in time of Graceland?
Yes, they're right behind the house. There was a small building that was offices. And I actually went to work for Uncle Vernon 6 months before he passed away. And that was in '79. And I started working there at the office with him, which I was really grateful for because, you grow up with your aunts and uncles and so forth, and you know them. But to really get on a level of adult to adult, that's really a tremendous thing. And Uncle Vernon and I became very close while I worked for him. So that was awesome. But that was the office. And then back behind that, of course, was the pasture and everything. And he had, the garage where motorcycles and things like that were kept. And then back to the left, behind a small fence, was mobile homes where we lived along with others.
When you were working with your Uncle Vernon, you were answering fan mail. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Can you recall, was there some crazy letters? I'm sure there had to be that people wrote in that you can recall.
Well, yeah, there were. Of course, you had people always writing in saying that they were, related, or that they were Elvis's son or Elvis's daughter or something like that. There were still women that, would send their unmentionables to him. So I started opening them with gloves. But yeah, I mean, you got some crazy mail, but most of it was just people who just loved and adored him, and wanted to let everybody know that at the house that he meant something wonderful to them, that he had touched their lives in a very particular and grateful way, and so they just wanted everybody to know that, and that's what 99 and 9/10% of the fans do, is they want everybody to know how Elvis touched their hearts and their lives and made a difference to them,
Did you think it was anything special to be living at Graceland, or was that just home to you?
Well, it was home, yeah. Of course, you would realize how different it was when you would drive out the gates and there were fans, standing around, no matter what time of day or night, how cold it was, how hot it was, or anything else, then you would realize, this is really something special. And I mean, it was special to be able to live there, and we knew who he was, but and what he had accomplished in his life. But to us, he was just Elvis, and just a family member that we loved and adored, and who he loved and adored back. So it was just family to us.
You mentioned that your nickname was Donnie from Elvis, and he gave everybody nicknames.
Yes.
And at 18 years of age, when you went to Graceland to visit your grandmother, who everybody called Dodger. And then tell the story where you were in your room and you had a rare moment, because there wasn't rare moments where you just had one-on-one time with Elvis, and he came in and talked to you. And what kind of advice did he give you?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was 18. I was spending the night with our grandmother there in her room, and my grandma had gone into the kitchen, and so I was sitting there watching television alone, and Elvis walked in, and it was just me and Elvis, and he comes over and he sits down on the floor in front of my chair, and he's just talking to me. Who am I dating? What am I going to do when I graduate from school, and things like that. And I told him, I said, well, I really don't know what I want to do yet, Elvis. And he said, well, let me give you a piece of advice. And he said, always remember this. You can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do if you'll remember these 4 things. Always have complete faith in God. Have faith in yourself. Be willing to work for what you want. And never let anyone tell you that you cannot accomplish your dreams, because I'm living proof that you can. So I've always remembered that. I've always adhered to that. And so there's, the only limits that we have are what we put on ourselves.
Agree. Love those four things as well. One thing that just kind of resonated with me is, did Elvis ever talk to you, or did you ever hear him talking to any of the family members about life comparison? Because he really didn't have a life in the public eye that he could go to. He was so big of a star, he just wasn't able to go anywhere where the normal person could. Did he ever speak about that?
Well, not really, not to me. He didn't. He knew he was extremely blessed to be able to do something that he loved to do. And, he always wanted to make sure that everybody else, that he blessed everybody else, because God had blessed him so greatly with his life and given him what he had and being able to accomplish the things that he accomplished. He wanted to bless everybody else. So, I know that there had to be moments that it had to be tough on him. He did tell me this, that same night that we were talking about, he said, Donnie, I envy you. And I said, why? You envy me?
Yeah.
He said, yeah. He said, when you go out, when a guy asks you out on a date, he asks you because he really likes you. And when a girl wants to be your friend, you know that she really likes you. She wants to be your friend because of you, because of who you are. And he said, but I don't have that luxury. I never know if someone's with me as a friend or as a girlfriend because they love me or because they love Elvis Presley. So right then, it's the first time that I ever really realized, how tough that life had to be. I know he was extremely grateful for it. But, that was an insight to that. And my mother had always said that Elvis was a bird in a gilded cage. And I think that's what really made that statement come home to me. Said that, I would give it up for this or anything like that,
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense in regard to the question that I asked. You had mentioned before that he asked you about who you were dating and said if somebody wants to date you, they want to date you because it was you and not because you're Elvis Presley. But there's also a really good story about when you were engaged, you brought your fiancé to Graceland and he had a little conversation with Elvis.
Yes. I was 19. I know, stupid. I know we're getting engaged that soon, but I had brought my fiance over to meet our grandmother. And so we were in the jungle room sitting on the couch there, and Elvis walked in. And of course, he walked over to us and he, kissed me on the forehead and, hey, Donnie, how are you? And I said, I'm fine, Elvis. And he said, well, who's this? And I said, this is my fiance. And I gave him his name. And so Elvis shook his hand. He said, hey, I'm Elvis Presley, like he always does, like you didn't know who he was. And so he said, fiance, huh? And I said, yeah. And he said, so tell me, when are you and Donnie getting married? Well, I know the guy was trying to be cute, and trying to make, really cool sounding. It didn't turn out that way. He said, when she can support me into the style which I've grown accustomed.
Oh,
yeah. And so I saw this muscle twitching in Elvis's chin. I thought, this is not going to end well. So I went, oh, okay. So anyway, he shook his hand again. He said, nice to meet you, like that. And he turned around and walked into our grandmother's room. Well, the next morning, I get a phone call. Come to Graceland. Well, I knew what it was about, so I kind of walked slowly. But I went into our grandmother's room, and she, said, sit down. And she said, Elvis says he's not going to let you marry this guy. And I said, what? And she said, yeah. I said, he was furious that he was in here. He was really angry and just telling me, there's no way in this world, I don't care what I have to do, that I'm going to let her marry this guy. He's not good enough for her. He's not this, he's not that. So I broke up with him. I thought, well, Elvis is smarter than I am, so I'll go with his ideas.
You probably should not have used that line with Elvis. He probably should have.
He probably shouldn't have. I doubt that he ever used it again.
Well, at least hope not. He's probably out there somewhere with a story. Somebody's going, yeah, right. Okay. Elvis Presley really said that. You said that to Elvis. He's like, no, I really did.
That's one of those world's dumbest ideas.
Yes. Elvis loved guns, and reportedly, I live in Vegas, that he shot up one of the top suites at the old International, which is now the Westgate Plaza in Las Vegas, just for fun. From what I found out is, did he not take a golf cart and just kind of take over the family garden there?
Yes, he did. He certainly did. But that was at Graceland that happened. My dad and mom had fixed a garden behind our mobile home, for summer vegetables. And so my dad, he tended it, very meticulously every day. And one night my mother woke my dad up and she said, Earl, that garden that we have out back? And he said, yes. And she said, don't worry about getting up to tend it in the morning. It's gone now. Elvis and them ran over it with the golf carts. Just having a good time,
I mean, I've heard you say he just wanted to have a good time, but was he a practical joker as well?
He was a tremendous practical joker. He loved to play jokes on people. He loved to laugh. And it was, it wasn't like, he didn't always go for the big, exciting things, it was just little things that he would do. I mean, now, a couple of times, I'll name a couple examples, but he loved to shoot fireworks. And so he took it just a little step further than most people who shoot fireworks. He wanted to shoot fireworks at each other. So he and all the guys would get Roman candles, and all the rest of us would stay inside the house or in a safety zone.
I would hope so.
And the guys would actually shoot Roman candles at each other. So one Christmas, they were doing this, and my mom had just bought my dad a leather coat. So Elvis goes out, and he thinks it'd be really, really funny to bundle up like 4 or 5 Roman candles and light them and then stick them in my dad's pocket. So he did that. Well, the coat caught on fire. My dad's coming out of the jacket. Everybody's laughing, And so not to be outdone by Elvis, my dad shoots a Roman candle back at Elvis, and he hits him in the neck. And so he had to delay filming for one of his films that time for a couple of weeks while it healed.
That has taken fireworks to a whole new extreme for sure.
It is indeed. Yes. I don't try this at home, folks.
No, I have heard of people shooting like bottle rockets and Roman candles out of cars as they're driving, but not at each other and sticking them in the pockets. That's a new one for me.
Well, he liked to live on the edge. That's why, he loved shooting guns, shooting fireworks, skating, and they would, I never was involved in any of the skating or anything like that, but they would do what they call the whip, where they'd get a bunch of people in a line, and whoever was on the very end got the worst of it.
Yep.
I made sure I stayed away from that sort of thing.
Donna, another question I think my listeners are going to want to know is, what type of person was Vernon, Uncle Vernon and Aunt Gladys, which is Elvis's parents?
Okay, Uncle Vernon, I can tell you about. He was a very firm man. He had lived through a lot of rough times, and the Depression and so forth. So, he was very cost conscious. He didn't want Elvis to spend all of his money giving it away, but, he was a very firm man, but he was a very honest and very fair man. He was loving and kind and funny as he could be. He had a very, very dry sense of humor, and he would say something to you, and you would be laying in the floor rolling and laughing, and he's sitting there looking at you like you've lost your mind. But he was really a great guy, and, he gave me a lot of advice, and I had come to him one time and to ask him, I said, I've got this problem and I'm not sure, what to do. And he said, well, here's what you do. You sit down and you consider the pros of your decisions and the cons of your decisions. And then you look inside your heart and make the decision of what you want to do, because you're the one that's going to have to live with the results of it. But he said, whatever you decide, you make sure you're woman enough to stand behind it.
It's pretty good stuff right there.
Yeah.
That's pretty good stuff.
He was a very
right
wise
there.
man, very great guy. I loved him dearly, and just a wonderful man, and loved Elvis more than anything in the whole world. And now Aunt Gladys, she died when I was 8 years old. I do remember her, but not well.
Being that you were at Graceland so much, were there times where you would just be walking in Graceland and you're like, oh, Elvis is singing, and you're basically getting a private concert and he's, singing away?
Yeah, well, at home, he mostly sang gospel. Now, if you had a certain song that you particularly liked, like he found out that my dad liked From a Jack to a King. So this is when we were on the Circle G. And my dad was standing outside the house. He was taking over for one of the guards while they went to lunch. And so Elvis found out that Daddy liked that song. And so he opened the window there at the house, the little cottage there that was on the Circle G. And he sat down on the piano and he sang that song and for my dad. So, there was just little things like that, that he thought you would enjoy or that he thought you would like. But when he was at home, he mostly sang gospel, and everybody around sang with him, and it just became a kind of a family and friends gospel hour, that kind of thing. So it was great to watch and great to sit there and listen to it.
I'll bet. You're just sitting there with the king of rock and roll, just singing some gospel.
I know, how cool is that, right?
Yeah, that's really cool. That's why you said earlier when I said, what was it like? You're like, can I say awesome? That would be awesome for a lot of our listeners right now. Did you ever see Elvis perform live?
Oh, many times. Many times. Okay. I did. Usually it was in Memphis. We did go to the Astrodome there in Houston, and we went to Florida and, Mississippi. So any place that was close that Elvis was playing, in a concert, we would go. Now, I never went to Vegas, which was my mistake, because all I would have had to say is, Elvis, I'd like to go to Vegas to see you perform. And I would have been, I would have been there.
Yep.
But, unfortunately, you grow up and you got your own life and you've got kids and you got, this and that. And I kept thinking, next time he goes, I'll tell him. And I ran out of next times. So I try to live my life now to make sure that I always do and ask her, or, what I want to, because you don't know if you're going to have tomorrow or not.
I agree with that 100%. Big time, a lot. You had said before that you were sitting in the jungle room at one time with your fiance when Elvis came in there. And I remember when I visited, that jungle room for me as a media person, just stood out. Wow, I could stay in here for hours. The jungle room, he sings about it in a couple songs down in the jungle room. The jungle room is absolutely what you think. It looks like you're in a jungle with this leopard giraffe print and every imaginable media device to your disposal.
Yes, exactly. It had the stone wall with the fire, with the water, fall. And it's awesome. It really is. It's something that you wouldn't think about, but Elvis saw it. And my uncle had said, well, who would buy that? And the next day it was moved into Graceland.
Donna, what do you miss most of living on Graceland?
Everything. Being there with my family, Elvis, our grandmother, my mom, my dad, my uncles, most of my family's gone now. And so I really miss that. And the memories are, deep in my heart, and they'll go with me everywhere I go. And I think of my family every single day of my life. And my one thought, my one prayer is that I'll always make them proud, represent God, represent my family, represent myself to the best of my ability. So, yeah, I miss everything.
Do you go back and visit anymore?
Very, very seldom. Very seldom. Now, I do go during Elvis week most of the time, and I will go up to the vigil, candlelight vigil. I do go through that. But it's very difficult for me. I've gone through Graceland with friends, and I get about halfway through, and then I've got to leave.
Yeah.
It's too emotional for me.
Didn't Lisa Marie own Graceland? And now that she's gone, who has the rights to it?
From her will and from everything that I've heard and understand, Riley and Harper and Finley.
Okay, so her children now have it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and rightfully so. They should have it. I mean, Elvis left it to his only child, and she's left it to her children. And that's the way it should be, definitely.
Did you have any type of relationship or know Priscilla at all?
When we were younger, yes, I did. She was 5 years older than I was. And so I was, always at Graceland. And we would go do things together. I remember, this is a really funny story here. We decided that we would go to each other's churches. Now, when she was younger, she was a Catholic. So we went to Immaculate Conception there in Memphis, which is a huge Catholic church, beautiful place. And it was so funny because we walk in. Well, I'd never even been in a Catholic church before because I was raised Assembly of God, which is totally different. So I walk in, we sit down, and everybody's going to think I'm stupid, but if you've never been in a Catholic church before, you don't know. I said, "Oh, that's cool. They got footstools." She said, "That's not a footstool. It's a kneeling bench." Oh, okay. So, but then after we left the Catholic church, we go to my church, which was the Assembly of God, and which was completely different, totally different than her church. So she had never been in Assembly of God. So she was sitting there in awe of seeing everybody sitting there singing and clapping their hands and speaking in tongues and that kind of thing. Well, it was so funny. We were sitting on the back row. And of course, Priscilla was a very gorgeous young woman. And there were some young men sitting just down from us on the same row. Well, one of them sent a note to her. It said, "Hi, my name is," whatever it was. "Would you like to go to a movie sometime?" And she looked at it. She showed it to me. And so then she brought back, she said, "I'm very flattered. Thank you. But I'm seeing someone." So she sends it back down. Well, we got in the car. We laughed all the way back to Graceland because I said, "Yeah, you're seeing someone. I just wish he knew who you were seeing."
Right. Yeah. Right. I was surprised she didn't write back. I'll have to ask Elvis about that.
But that was, I don't even know if she remembers that or not, but that was a really fun time, But yeah, we were friends when we were much younger. Yeah.
Donna, when did you decide then to start telling stories about Graceland and Elvis, or have you been doing this really your whole life?
Well, no, honestly, because, when you grow up in a family like the Presley family, everything's kept inside the family, because anything that you say, anything that you do could be in the press the next day, so everything was very in-house, I'll give you an example. I was staying there one summer. I was about, I don't know how old I was, 14, 15, something like that, maybe a little younger. And the phone rang and I answered it. Well, this was the time when Elvis was doing the film with Donna, what's her name? On the Beverly Hillbillies.
Drawing a blank. I can picture her, but I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, but anyway, and so anyway, I answered the phone. And they said, "Could we speak to Elvis?" And I said, "I'm sorry, no, he's not here," which he wasn't. And they said, "Well, who is this?" And I said, "This is Donna." And they said, "Are you staying there?" And I said, "Yes." Well, I mean, I didn't know it was the Associated Press. But anyway, the next day it came out in the paper that Elvis was living with Donna, his co-star. Because I said Donna. So anyway, I mean, that was pretty funny. Uncle Vernon said, "I don't answer the phone anymore." So I didn't. But that was pretty funny. But I mean, it was just, things like that. We didn't talk about things outside the family, But after Elvis's death, my mom always wanted to do a book. To let people know about Elvis the man. Everybody knew the legend, the superstar, but we wanted people to know what kind of wonderful, loving, caring, tender man that Elvis was. I mean, he was the most giving person in the world, not just of money, and monetary things, but of his time, of his talents, and his heart. He truly did. And I'm saying this with all honesty in my heart, Tommy. He truly did care more about everybody else than he did himself.
Speaking on that, Donna, then it kind of ties into something I was going to ask you is Elvis had a bunch of health problems. He was a very sick man at the time of his death. I understand that there was a time where, I don't know if it was your grandmother or somebody asked him to take a break, and he said he could not because too many people were relying on him for their own jobs.
That was my mom. Yeah. She told him, she was sitting there talking to him in our grandmother's room, and she said, Elvis, honey, you're not well. You need to just go in the hospital, get yourself well, and that before you go back out on tour. And he said, Aunt Nash, I understand what you're saying, but he said, if I take a break, my family and I we'll be fine. But he said, it's all those people out there that are counting on me to show up at those concerts, from the people who take care of the lights to, putting chairs or whatever, all of these things, they're all depending on me. And he said, the fans, they bought and paid for their tickets. So they deserved to be able to come and see me. And he said, so I just can't do it. So there and again, he was thinking of everybody else other than himself.
I heard that story and it just kind of resonated with me. And then you brought that up. I'm like, okay, this ties in perfectly from there.
Yeah.
Donna, were you living on Graceland or off Graceland when Elvis passed?
I was living off Graceland. I was married and had 2 small children. And my mother called me, and she was crying uncontrollably. And she said, pray for Elvis, pray for Elvis. And I said, what's wrong? Mom, what is it? What is it? She said, just pray for Elvis. And she hung up. And so being raised in faith and prayer, I gathered my 2 little boys to me, and we went in the living room and we knelt down and I started praying. I didn't know what I was praying for. I just knew that Elvis needed our prayers. And about 20 minutes later, the phone rang again, and it was my mom, and she was still absolutely hysterical. And she said, it's too late. It's too late. And I said, Mom, what are you talking about? And she said, it's Elvis. He's gone. Come up here immediately. So I acquired a babysitter and I went to Graceland. And when I walked in the back door, Uncle Vernon was sitting outside our grandmother's room in a chair on the phone. And he was just a broken man in every sense of the word. Every breath that he took was like an effort, for him to do. And he hung up the phone, and I knelt down in front of him and I hugged him and I said, Uncle Vernon, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He said, I know. He said, I don't know. I don't know what we'll do without him. How are we going to, how can we make it through this life, and get through life without him, because Elvis was Uncle Vernon's whole world. And he was such a huge part of each and every one of our lives. I mean, when you've been in that, I guess, kind of a bubble, and that bubble is filled with sunshine and light. And then all of a sudden that sunshine, that light is taken. It's devastating.
You had mentioned before in another interview that I heard you talk about witnessing Uncle Vernon basically just grieve himself to death.
Yes, he absolutely did. The 6 months that I worked for him before he passed away, his desk was right next to mine. And he would come in and he would sit there with his feet up on the desk, and he had a straight line view of the edge of the memorial gardens. And he would sit there every day and just sit there and look at it. And just every breath was like almost like a death rattle, and just literally grieved himself to death. Absolutely did.
One of the things that I think could be a misconception, and it really didn't hit home for me until I heard you talk about it. There's a lot of people that believe there's an overdose to prescription pills. And in that era, it wasn't talked about. And a lot of stars were on a lot of many different prescription pills. Marilyn Monroe, Elvis. I mean, there's a list of them that's just what they did. That was that time period. That was that era. But what I thought was really eye-opening was when you mentioned that every member of the Presley family has died of congestive heart failure, every single one of them. And that really was an eye-opening going, well, then there's a hereditary trait then of this Presley family of everybody's died of congestive heart failure.
That's true. Every single one.
It is.
Everyone.
It's remarkable that when you go through and you think about it going, yep, that's every one of them. And then regardless of what he was taking medication for, he was a sick man. He had health problems. Yeah. That's beside the point. That's beside the point of how many, or that doesn't even come into the equation. What comes into the equation is that he died of congestive heart failure. He died at 42, way too early. Yes. And to this day, and I think it's going to go on forever, Elvis Presley and Elvis Presley's music is never going to die. It's always going to live on. I think every generation that finds out about Elvis becomes enamored with the guy, and he's been dead longer than he was alive, and he's still as popular as ever.
Absolutely. You're so correct, Tommy. Thank you for mentioning that. I mean, like you said, 46 years, since his passing this August, and he's more relevant or as relevant today as he ever was. And, of course, he was the greatest entertainer that ever walked across the stage. There's no doubt about that. Had the best voice, the most gorgeous man. I mean, he was the whole package. Mm-hmm. But I think that people remember him, and people still hold him in their hearts, and that love that they have for him, and they raise their children and their grandchildren on that love and the heart of the man, because he was a role model. He was not perfect. None of us are. We all have feet of clay, but he had a heart of pure gold. And, he really stood for faith in God, for love of family, love of friends, and for, honoring and loving his country, and gladly served his country as a regular soldier when he could have done the USO or whatever. He could have had I guess you call it a cakewalk as far as that's concerned. But no, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to serve it as a regular soldier and earn the respect and love of fellow soldiers. And that was Elvis. He was a man's man. I was telling someone the other day, he said, because he was the whole package. I said, he was a man that every man wanted to be, and a man that every woman wanted to be with. So.
That is a very accurate line right there for sure. Donna, did you see the new movie? And if so, what did you feel was accurate about it, and what was not portrayed correctly?
I think Austin Butler did a really good job. You could tell that he studied his craft, and it was a beautiful movie as far as the, cinematography and everything. However, there was parts of it that were completely erroneous. It portrayed Uncle Vernon as this weak-minded, spineless, money-hungry guy that cared only about money. And that is so far from the truth. It's not even the same on the same planet, let alone the same, country. He wasn't like that at all. It portrayed Elvis's mom and other family members, I think, in a very erroneous way. People were just hanger-ons. We all lived at Graceland because Elvis wanted us at Graceland. He knew that his family loved and adored him for being Elvis and not for being Elvis Presley. So he could always count on the love of family, no matter what. And it's just like with my mom, my mom was 9 years old when Elvis was born, and they grew up together. They played together, and she babysat him and things like that. And they were always very close. And he would call my mom over, a lot of times at night. And because my mother was an Assembly of God minister, they would go up in his room, and he'd wrap her in a blanket because he kept it so cold there. And they would study the Bible for hours. And I mean, he knew it frontwards and backwards and sideways, and he just, he was just that kind of man that always stood up for that. And that's why people today from age 2 to 92 still love and adore him, because he's still touching their hearts and lives and making a difference in them. I still get letters today. And when I was, doing the fan mail, people would write in and say, I was going through a really hard time, and Elvis's music got me through it, and knowing who he was. And I got to tell you this one really cool story. I was in London, and there was a play there that was opening on the West End, and I was spokesperson for it, and it was Jailhouse Rock. Well, OK Magazine found out about that I was there, and they knew that the Duchess of Devonshire at that time was an Elvis fan. And so they contacted her, and she invited me and some others out to Chatsworth Castle. And so we went out there, and, I'm walking through, this is royalty, America, we just love royalty, And so anyway, I, walked in there, and she was such a wonderful, warm woman, but very regal. And so we walked around, and she was showing us different places there in her, I guess, part of the castle, her home. And there were Monets, and there was this huge, floor to ceiling portrait of Henry VIII, and, all this. And I'm looking at all this stuff, and there in the middle of all this was an easel with a picture of Elvis on it. And then I walk into her sitting area, and there's one of those Elvis telephones where it rings and his legs, shake like this.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there like, this is just mind blowing, And we had, tea with her. And so she stands up after we have tea, and she says, Donna, come with me. Everyone else stay here. So we walk down this long corridor, and I said, oh, this is just, I'm pinching myself, And we go up to her private bedroom that was built in the 12th century. And she's got this huge canopy bed, and there's the fireplace. Over the fireplace were pictures of Elvis all across the fireplace. And so she says, sit down. I want to ask you about Elvis. So she was asking me questions about Elvis, and I was telling her, and she was sitting there hanging on every word. And I said, well, Your Grace, I had to have a tutorial before I spoke with her, okay, because you have to do it properly. And you have to know what to call them. So I said, Your Grace, have you always been an Elvis fan? And she said, oh, no, dearie. But I was watching the telly one night, and I saw him on there. And he was such a gentleman, and said such a presence and a heart of gold, and was just so amazing. And I've been a fan ever since. And I said, well, let me tell you, I said, it is such an honor for me to be here in his stead, because he always wanted to go to Europe and perform in Europe and was not able to. And to me, I feel like that's my legacy, to be able to go to places that he was not able to go to, and stand in his stead, and hopefully bring a little bit of Elvis and the family and what we are about, to the fans. And, but I said, it's such an honor. And she said, oh, no, dearie, indeed, it's my honor, and I'm thinking, wow, there's a girl from Arkansas, and I'm in, Chatsworth Castle. Well, then right after that, we did an interview with the BBC. And so, I said, yeah, we were just at Chatsworth Castle, to visit the Duchess, and the young man that was the PR guy with us, he said, we don't call it a castle. They call it her home. And I said, well, it's got all these thousands of acres. It's got all these hundreds of rooms. And I said, where I'm from is a castle. But it was very, very cool. And she and I exchanged books. And it was such a wonderful experience. And they asked her, so, Your Grace, would you like to come to the play tonight and see it? And so she asked me, she said, are you going to be there? And I said, yes, Your Grace, I will. She said, then I'll go. And so she came to the play, and She went upstairs with us to the green room during intermission. It was the coolest thing ever. It really was. It was so amazing.
It is an amazing story. I'm glad that you just shared that. Listeners, I want you to go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link to thedonnapresleycollection.com where you can go to the website. You can also follow her on Facebook, and I'll put a link to that. And she has some books. I said in the opening that she's a co-author of several books: Elvis, Precious Memories, an in-depth look into the family who came before Elvis, and then Precious Family Memories of Elvis, a memory book of family photos and sayings. And then there's a cookbook of recipes of the Presley family and some of his famous friends. And then the new book, which is self-published, One Flower While I Live, Elvis as I Remember Him. Donna, tell me about the new book that's self-published.
Well, that was the book that my mom wrote, and she wrote it in 1987. And to be honest, that was the very first book that came out, but she self-published it. And so she only had like 1,200 copies, and, they sold quickly. And so years and years later, everybody kept saying, where can I find your mom's book? Where can I find your mom's book? And I said, well, it's not in print. And I got so many requests for it that I decided to go ahead and republish it and add some of my stories to it. And so that's the last book that was published. But yeah, I mean, it takes you from the day of Elvis's birth up till after his death. So because it has mom stories in there, and talking about, the day Elvis was born and then, growing up with him and the fun things that they did together.
I'll put links in the show notes. Listeners, you can go there where you can get your hands on a copy of the books. Donna performs and travels the world singing and telling stories. Is there a place where listeners can go, hey, I want to go see Donna perform? Where can they find that?
Well, actually, I leave this Wednesday. I'm going to Germany and to Grafenau, Germany, and then I go to Italy. And then we go to the TCB cruise with Dennis Jail. And there'll be a lot of people that worked with Elvis, like Linda Thompson, his longtime girlfriend will be on there with us, and Glenn D. Harden, and there's Paul Lyme, and Larry Strickland, who sang backup with Elvis, Donna Rhodes, and Ginger Holiday, who sang backup on, so many songs. And so it's going to be amazing to be able to be there with everybody. It's going like being with family, and for the fans to be able to come on, and we're going to do a couple of shows on the ship.
Is there any spots in the United States booked yet?
Not in the United States. No, not yet.
We got to find you a spot. We got to get you to Vegas. We got to get you out here to Vegas.
That's awesome. I'll let you work on that.
Yeah, see what I can dig up for you.
Okay.
Do you have any of Elvis's personal items that you've kept yourself?
I do. Yeah. But, I keep them, and to be honest with you, I mean, there's things that, like my grandmother's handkerchiefs and things like that, if someone's really special, that I will, I'll give them, a handkerchief or something like that. But yeah, there are a few things that I have, yes.
I want to close with this because you're on the board of Choosing to Live, which is for suicide prevention. And with this society today with so much emphasis on mental health, talk about how you got involved and got on the board on this.
The man who founded it, his name's Louis Michael. And the funny thing is he started out when he was like 17 or 18 years old. He was an Elvis tribute artist. And, he's an amazing man, and he's lived, such an amazing life. And he founded this because he had struggles with suicide himself. And he came out on the other side, and he wants people to realize that, before you pick up pills or before you pick up a gun or whatever, pick up the telephone and call. And so that's what this charity is all about, is we raise money to be able to give people, see that they can get medication, that they can get counseling, whatever they need, we're there for them. And, to give them an alternative and let them know that, there is a tomorrow, and things always seem really, really dark, but there's always a shining light if you'll just give it a chance.
Listeners, as I continue to say on every show, go to the show notes because I will put links to this. So you don't even have to look it up. Just go to the show notes. You can make a click. It'll take you right to this charity so you can check it all out. Donna, I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on my show, telling some stories, having some laughs. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you, Tommy. It's been a load of fun, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You are more than welcome. Listeners, check out my YouTube channel, The Light Tommy Canale, short inspirational videos to get you on the path to a greater you and a better life. You know where to find it. Click the link in the show notes. That's going to do it for this episode of Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.